Hi and welcome. This video is for new students about to join us and participate in our online tutorials and workouts. Because we don't have an active working dojo right now during the COVID pandemic, we want to take the opportunity to introduce you to some of the things that we do in class and in our workout that might be different from what you've done before if you have practiced in another dojo in another style, or in a similar style but not quite the same as us, or if you're a complete newbie. So this way I can show you some of the things that are proprietary or standard that would help you participate in class, and it gives me the opportunity to show it to you now and not have to take that time to interrupt class and show it to you during class time, which is precious. So I'm going to go through a bunch of things that are in our workout, and not everything, just things that people might have a little difficulty understanding and playing along with if we do it in real time in class. So this way you can kind of ground yourself on what those practices are and how to go about doing them. And some of our standard positions, including sitting in seiza and standard foot positions. So I'm going to go through those with you, and hopefully this will give you a good grounding in what to expect in class. Now, to be clear, I'm not expecting you to learn all this stuff directly before taking class, or even within the first few weeks of class, because it's difficult and there's a lot of different things that you may not be used to or comfortable with until you've practiced it quite a few times. So this is really just for you to review and to give you an idea, and then become a reference point for you to come back to and have a look at and say, oh well, we did that thing in class and I didn't quite get it. Now I can have a look at it and see in this reference how to do it properly, and maybe practice it a little bit more at home and get more comfortable doing that so that you're ready to do it the next time you come to class. So no pressure, you don't have to learn everything, just review it and maybe try some of the things and get a feel for what it is we're looking for when we do these various things. Item number 1 is, how do we sit in what we call seiza? Sitting in seiza is sitting in this position. And it is different in different practices. So I'm not saying that this is better than any other dojo's version of it. It's just the way we do it. And I'll explain a little bit why it is that we do it in this fashion. So when we sit in seiza, what we're doing is we're sitting with our feet underneath us like this, either touching. Some people like to actually cross them over, which is perfectly fine too. That's what we're doing. And when we're sitting, we have our shoulders and hips in alignment and our hands coming forward like so that we are upright and our chest is out and our belly is available to breathe deep down into our belly. So if you're leaning forward, you're constricting your belly, and that means that your deep breathing is more difficult. The version of seiza that we do is basically an equilateral triangle. So the distance from your knee to basically your ankle or heels should be similar to the distance between your knees at the front. Now, if you've been in many Japanese dojos, you might find that it's a much smaller version. A lot of karate dojos operate with a seiza like this, and they'll put their hands back here. You'll find this in Jiu-Jitsu and Aikido dojos as well. So everybody has their own version, and this has its own valuable properties. But the version that we're doing is a wider knee position, and that's all to do with being very stable. So an equilateral triangle is one of the most stable positions you can find. So that's what we do. And then we're going to bring our hands forward. Depending on your arm to body ratio, this might end up being slightly different. In my case, my knuckles end up right across my knee bend. And that, I know, is where my shoulders are over my hips. and my spine is nice and straight, and I can breathe deeply. So we breathe through our nose and out through our mouth. We breathe down into our belly, so we, instead of puffing up our chest, when we breathe in, we push our belly out and then breathe out through our mouth. So this is a great recovery position if you are out of breath, for instance. If you sit like this, as many people do, this is not a very good recovery position because you can't breathe very deeply. Your belly is quite constricted. Whereas if we go into Seiza, we're able to breathe very deeply, and it's a good way of re-oxygenating your body. And this is our standard position for sitting in class when we're in dojo, and also when we start our class, when we go to our starting meditation. So it's something to just practice getting into. Now when we get into this position, what we do is we go down on our right knee, and then tuck our left knee under, and then sit back and spread our legs to make sure we're in the correct triangle formation. To come up, we come onto our right knee, bring our left knee up, and stand straight up. So the idea is that we're moving mostly in a vertical plane, not forward and backwards a lot. So if I show from the side, to come up, the toes come underneath me, and I'm in what we call Hamni. To come down, same thing. So I'm not really moving backwards and forwards very much. So that's what we call Seiza, and so when we say sit in Seiza, this is what we mean. And we start class by Mokuso, which is a slow meditative breathing at the start of class. It's a good way to get into the mood for learning. We sit in Seiza, which I explained last week how to do. We breathe in through our nose, out through our mouth. We close our eyes most of the way, but not all the way, just enough so that you can still see the mat and see the floor around you, so you can maintain situational awareness. We don't like to not be aware of our surroundings and what's going on. So you basically close your eyes almost all the way down. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Mokuso. Mokuso yame. Onegaishimasu. Both arms forward. Ich, ni, san, shi. Go, reverse, ich, ni, san, shi, go. Notice when I'm going forward, I'm bringing my hands in, palms facing my face. When I'm going the opposite way, palms are facing out, like so. Left hamni, left hand under your right elbow, right hand in. Again, palm towards your face, ich, ni, san, shi, go. Now palm out, ich, ni, san, shi, go. Shake it in, shake it out, side to side. Punch. Right thigh, hips to the right. Ich, ni, san, shi, go. Remember, try and keep your head in the same position. On thigh. Ich, ni, san, shi, go. Ready for torso rotations to the right. Let me show one. The idea is that we're going to come up. As we come up, our hips come forward. And we go back. We're looking at the ceiling at this point at the 180 degrees. As we come down, hips go back, and we're looking at the mat again. So, to the right, ich, ni, san, shi, go. Push up position, head up, right leg up, down, left leg up, down, head down, back, scoop, back, down, head up, right leg up, down, left leg up, down, head down, back, scoop, back, down, I'm going to show you some positions to hold your body in or your feet in when we are doing our practice. Our base position in our jiu-jitsu practice is called hamni, and it consists of having one foot slightly in front of the other like this, and our obi knot pointing forward. Okay? And the way we judge how to get into hamni is we put both our feet together like so, slightly turned out, maybe 15 degrees between them. And we'll take one foot and put the heel at the toe of the other. And then imagine making a line with your toes there and putting the heel of your front foot onto that line. So now your feet, they're not quite in line, but they are almost in line. And in order to make that comfortable, you have to bend your knees. Bending your knees is a very important factor in everything that we do. So you bend your knees, and you bend them until you feel that your heels are slightly starting to leave the ground. So there's almost no weight on your heels, it's all on the balls of your feet. This is our standard hamni position. And then we'll either have our hands up in a guard, or in various other positions ready to work. One of the reasons we do a small tight hamni is that it means that you can pivot very easily. So the small tight hamni is what we often use for boken practice. A right foot forward right hamni is what we do with boken practice. And a slightly bigger hamni is how we do most of our practice for defensive maneuvers. So again, what I'm doing is I'm in hamni, I have my obi knot pointing forward, my shoulders above my hips, my knees are bent. That's our standard hamni. Now we also have what we call fighting stance. And fighting stance is slightly wider, more shoulder width, and slightly turned, so that we're not open. So we're slightly turned and our front elbow is in a protective position. So depending on what we're doing, we might be starting in hamni, or we might be starting in fighting position. And you'll see this in our striking class. We'll be in fighting position or fighting stance most of the time. And for a lot of the defensive jiu-jitsu practice, we'll be in hamni for the start. The hand positions for hamni are the rear hand is about one fist away from your solar plexus in front of you, and the other hand is one fist in front of that and higher, just about nose height, so you can see over it. You don't want it blocking your vision. So this is protecting your head, and this is protecting your core. And when we change our hamni to the opposite side, our hands change to that position too. So those are our basic standard foot positions. If we say natural stance, we mean feet even like so, shoulders above hips, and hands either on your belt, by your side, or loose. And once we go into fighting position, we're like so, or hamni like so. And left hamni. Remember, bend your knees. You should feel your heels start to leave the mat. Shoulders over hips. Bend the knees until your heels are barely touching. Kotegesh. At the start of class, we often do this set of joint locks. The first one we do is called Kotegesh, and Kotegesh is a twisting wrist lock. So the way it works, and we come a bit closer, is that if your wrist is like this, and the hand that's applying it is going to come up around the thumb like so, and twist it and bend it at the same time. So it's both getting twisted and it's getting bent into this position. So the final position is something like so. And when we practice it, we bring it up and down from like straight wrist to bent wrist and twisted, getting applied, straight, bent, straight, bent. So you want to be able to grab deep around the meat of the thumb and use your thumb of the grabbing hand to counterlever that and twist the entire wrist around. So Kotegaeshi, when we do it, is we come into position, so we bring our hand up, we grab it like so, and we rotate it, and then we bounce it up and down. You should feel tension in the edge of your wrist joint here and in the top here, and it should feel like if you twist it a little bit further that joint would start to separate and break. So Kotegaeshi on the opposite side, same thing. You'll never notice that I'll often be pointing my index finger. And people say, oh, the index finger, that's the one that does all the work, right? Your index finger is a little bit shorter than your center finger, your middle finger. And also, the distance to your thumb is far greater from your middle finger than from your index finger. So what that means is that when we're putting a grip on something, we can get around it further by using the middle finger. And it's often a good idea to just have the index finger out of the way. It's also good to be able to point it at things. So often when I'm doing techniques, you'll see me pointing my finger in the direction of the rotation or the direction of the line of action. So index fingers, you don't necessarily need to use them for a lot of these things. So Kotegaeshi, I point my index finger. It lets me see which direction I'm pointing and which direction I'm torquing this wrist. Same thing on the opposite side. My fingers are just splaying just because I'm putting a lot of pressure across them here. They can be in any position. But the other hand is doing the lock and applying it up and down and rotating, twisting, all at the same time. So that's called Kotegaeshi, and that's our first in our sequence. The second in our sequence is actually number 1, EQ. So then we do EQ, NIKU, SANKU, as in 1, 2, 3. So EQ is basic number 1 wrist lock, and it's all about taking that joint and bending it further this way. So you bend the fingers, not a lot happens because fingers bend. So the length of the lever from the fulcrum, from the hinge joint of your wrist to your knuckles, that's the longest lever, so that's basically where you're going to be pushing. So what we can do is we can bring our hands with the blade of our hands going across those knuckles. Again, I'm leaving my index finger out because it's too short to be useful here, and I also don't want it in the joint. Right, so the thumb comes underneath like that. Again, not in the joint, but past the joint, so that we can bend that joint fully and use the blade of our hand, which is where our elbow is exerting the most pressure on the base of our hand, to enforce that lever against the fulcrum, against the hinge, and then we're just going to go up and down, bringing it in and out of the lock. And usually what happens when we do this at the start of class, we'll do blah blah blah, we'll do a bunch of them, and then we'll stop and park it in the full lock position. So that means that you can kind of get a little bit of an extra stretch. You've kind of warmed it up, loosened it up a little bit, and then you stretch it a little bit further. So that'll allow you to, again, potentially have a little bit more reaction time if somebody does this to you. And then untie, we go to the opposite side, same thing, up, down, and eventually we're going to park it here. So again, the index finger helps us see the angle of rotation. If my finger's pointing like that, I might not have done enough of the lock. I need to kind of have it pointing up. Depends on how flexible your wrists are, right? So don't hurt yourself, and don't expect to match me. My wrists are actually very tight, so you might be able to get much bigger extension on them than I'm getting. but just know your body and stay safe. Antai. So that's number 1, as in EQ. Number 2 is NIQ. So the second lock. This time we're going to have our hand like this, which is with our thumb facing down, pointing straight out from our body. So I've got this right angle, right angle, right angle going on here. And our locking hand comes over, thumb on top, thumb on the inside. And again, I'm trying to take this row of knuckles. I don't need the thumb, but having the thumb is useful because then they can start grabbing you. And I'm going to rotate it this way towards my face. Now, hard to do at that angle there, so I have it like so. Thumb is pointing down. I'm going to leave the thumb down so you can see, just to make sure people understand. This thumb comes on top. So both my hands are basically pointing the same direction. One has thumb up, one has thumb down. Thumb comes over the top. I grab the whole bunch of knuckles. Index finger, again not doing anything. And now I'm going to pull it towards my body and rotate it up. And bring your elbows up for this. So bring it down, rotate it, and pull towards your face. Don't let your elbows go above your shoulders. Okay, if your fingers go above your shoulders. And in, rotate, and back. Now my wrists are very tight for this, so you might find that you can do a lot more than I can with this. Opposite side, thumb on top, rotate it up, down, rotate, down, rotate. The NIQ coming from the side, so again your thumb is down, hand is on top, and you're rotating it towards your face like that. So that gives you an idea of what the movement is. You can make it go down, out, and back up, down, out, and back up. Again, we're all about rotating that cluster of knuckles against the wrist. Okay, so that's NIQ. The next one is Sankyu, number 3. And for Sankyu, we bring our hands up like this and over like that, so that we have this kind of square of right angles. And a hand comes across. Again, I'm going to the knuckle row with my knuckles. We have a finger, goes across like that, and turns the hand out. So this is Sankyu. We don't go back and forth with this one, we just get the position and hold it. Jack it up a little bit so you can see it clearer. You don't want to jack it up too high because then you'll end up leaning with your body, so you want to try and maintain some kind of poise while you're doing it. Again, the index finger is not really doing anything, but there's nothing to point it at either, so I'm just ignoring it. And the other side, again, you want to get that square going and turn it this way. Now from the side, you'll see you want to have it as vertical as possible. You don't want to be doing it like this. You want to try and bring that hand in underneath the elbow and twist. So from the front, I'm trying to be able to see the hand, the palm of the hand, if your wrist, shoulder, elbow joints will allow you to do that. So again, whatever you got, you start here, you come over and you twist it, and whatever you got, you hold it there, breathe into it, and relax. So the next one's called Shihonagi, and this one is the one that probably has the greatest diversity of people being able to get into position for this. And that's due to body type and to do with muscle mass. So if you're very built up muscles in the shoulder areas and stuff, you might have difficulty doing this. So it'll depend. Do what you can. So I'm pretty flexible in the shoulders, so it allows me to do it pretty well. So Shihanagi looks like this. The arm that's getting the lock on it comes up. So basically, elbows at kind of shoulder height. Hand is pointing in a straight blade. It's not bent, it's not fisted or anything. It's just straight. The other arm comes up underneath. So you've got your elbow crossing over past your elbow joint here, and it's going to come up, grab that hand, and rotate it down like that. So again, if you can't do this, don't be surprised. A lot of people cannot do this. From this side you can see that I've got my thumb pointing down, my fingers are in a straight line with the arm, and I'm rotating it down. So what's happening to my body is that this is a shoulder lock, right? It's not my wrist, it's not my elbow. They're both kind of hurting maybe a little bit, but what's coming apart is my shoulder here, right? If you get good at it, what you can do is once you get your hand to as low as it goes and you can feel that shoulder starting to separate, then you can start bringing up the elbow and you get additional shoulder separation, but also now you start feeling your elbow joint start to separate, and also a little bit in the wrist. So this can be a triple break if done effectively. Pop, pop, pop. So it's good to practice, good to get the stretch you can get out of it. Other side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that I am much more muscle bound in the shoulders, and I find that my hand only comes to here. I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? So one of the things you can do is you can put your head over here and you can push. And that might be all the stretch you get, just enough to push it a little bit. If you can get it far enough with your head, you might get, an inch over 6 months. You get it further along enough that you can grab that thumb with the other hand, and then you can slowly start to take your head away from it and use that thumb to pull it down. And then you might get another inch or another inch. Again, you might never change. It all depends on your body type and what it's capable of doing. For those of us who can, we can come past that, come up on top, and keep bringing it down and bringing the elbow up eventually. So this is Shihanagi. And yummy. So the final one is pretty simple. It's basically a finger wrist stretch. We hold out our hand as though we were like begging for money or something, and then we just take the wrist and thumb across the knuckle joints like so, and you bend it back and stretch out your arm, straighten out your elbow. So let me just sit up straight for this, otherwise you won't be able to see it. So we hold out our hand like we're begging, we take the fingers, we bend them backwards, pop that elbow straight, and then bring it underneath like that. And you can kind of play with it, you can wiggle the knuckles, move the fingers one at a time, move your thumb back and forth like you're playing a thumb-only piano, and pressing down on each of those joints, getting them nice and flexible. Again, this is one that I don't have a lot of flexibility with, so you might find yourself getting much further with this. And the other side, same thing. Stretch and play those knuckles with your thumb. Get individual stretches for each of the fingers. Of all the locks, a fingered lock might actually be one of the more painful ones, right? So you want to be 2 fingers is best. If your fingers get bent back against your body, you'll be quite reluctant to go anywhere else other than where your hand is being directed. So you might want to get some stretch into those fingers, again, in case this type of lock is ever applied to you. You have the potential of having an extra millisecond to react. And just like anything that we do, every method has got a way of being reversed on you or getting countered in some fashion. So one of the things that we're learning as we do this is not only how to apply, but how to resist. So being able to play in these wrist locks, right? Get a feeling for them, understand where the pressures are coming from and what's applying them, gives you also the opportunity to resist, as in just muscle resistant tension, and also counter them by finding the correct angle to allow the least amount of pressure and the least amount of danger to your wrist. So those are our wrist locks that we do and practice at the start of every class. I'll go through them one more time quickly so you can remember them. So the first one is Kotegesh, looks like this, and second side, do the second side. Second one is lock number 1, or EQ, goes like this. Third is lock number 2, which is an EQ, looks like this. Fourth is lock number 3, Sankyu, looks like that. Fifth is Shihanagi, looks like that. And the last one is the finger wrist stretch, looks like that. So that's what we do, and that's what we are doing and why we're doing it when we do those wrist lock technique practices at the start of every class. So hopefully you can practice it too and catch up with us. So this is called Tai Sabaki, also known as Tenkan, and it's a foot movement. We also have upper body movement to go with it. First we're going to start out with just the feet. So with our left foot forward, we can slide forward with our right foot, pivot, slide back with our left, so our right foot is forward now. And again, right foot forward, so step in with the left, pivot, step back with the right. Now the left is back in front again. So again, it's fairly simple, but takes a lot of practice to get it right, because your body doesn't necessarily do things in this fashion. So again, the first thing is we're going to step in, and our foot should be pretty much in front of our other foot, because what's going to happen is as we pivot, this foot has to come past this one to get to its home position. And notice my ankles are pretty much rubbing against each other as we do this. So if I do this towards camera, my left foot is forward, my ankles touch as they come in, I pivot, my ankles touch as I go back to my final position. So what that means is that we're trying to do this in as narrow a position as possible. And as I'm known to do, I can put down some of my weapons as a demonstration. So here we have a gap between the bow and the jo. That's basically about the length of my foot, right? So the idea is that we should be able to come in, pivot, come back, come in, pivot, come back, within that space. So the idea is that we're coming in, we're pivoting, and we're coming back. One important aspect is that the shoulders stay over the hips all the time. So if you imagine yourself as just an upright that's just moving, that only has articulation below the hips. So the hips and shoulders stay together, shoulders stay above hips, and hips move, shoulders move. And now with the hands, the idea is that the hands are going to come out with centrifugal force and come back in. Come out as you spin, pop back in. So I'm not really forcing them, I'm just sort of letting them spring out. But I am making sure that they come back to here. There's a tendency that their hands come back to here. So when we come out, make them land in front of you. Don't let your hand go behind your hip at any point. Same thing, they come out and land. Towards the camera, I'll show that again. They come out, land, and out, land. So the entire out and back looks like this. And going across looks like this. So the other essential factor here is that we have to break our momentum. We're going in one direction and then we have to stop. So the tendency is that people will break by stopping by putting all their weight on their back heel, and then their weight goes backwards like that. Shoulders goes behind hips. I'm off balance, I've got nothing on this foot, and not a very good position to be in. So what we're doing is we're coming in and we dig in that pivoting foot so we can take more weight. So there's not a lot of weight on the one coming back, so as our body finds its final position, we're actually settling into that back foot as opposed to transferring all our weight to it. So again, it's subtle and it takes a lot of practice to get it right, but the idea is that when I get there, there's not much weight on my back foot so that I can afford to just settle onto it. And the final element is that we want to keep our knees bent, right? So if your knees are locked, then it's much harder to control your balance and to distribute your weight, and it's also much harder to pivot and turn with straight locked legs. So again, we're coming in and we have to keep that knee bent, because otherwise we'll have a tendency to lock it out and then transfer weight onto a locked leg, and again that's out of balance. So bend the knees, hands out, and in case it's not obvious, you should be breathing with every motion. So the breathing, I'll exaggerate it so you can hear it, is so that's breathing out, obviously, in case that's not obvious. So you breathe in before you go, and then the breath finishes when you finish and pushes you through the entire motion. So it's not like a punch, where a punch is and has that kind of staccato on it. This is more like it's like so it's extending your breath and the pushing down of your diaphragm as you go through the motion. So that's Taisabaki. That's one of our main footwork practices. And the idea is that if you have, the opposite foot forward to uke, they're coming in towards you on this side, you can come around and be outside them like that. As opposed to hitch step pivot, which means I have the foot forward that I want to have forward in that situation and can slide in and pivot instead of Taisabaki in. So that's the other footwork that we want to practice. It's called hitch step pivot, and like its name suggests, it's got a hitch step and it's got a pivot, and it's got very little else. So the idea here is that we're sliding in and bringing our back foot with us and then pivoting, right? There's no point in this footwork where one foot slides past the other. This time they maintain their distance from each other. So pushing from the back foot instead of stepping with the front foot. So push, slide, bring the back foot with you, pivot, and push, slide, pivot. Now, breaking it down like that, it might seem a little bit easier, but actually what happens is there's a locking of the pulling around of the hips, and that helps bring your feet into their final positions. So as you pivot, the front foot might be out a little bit, and as your hip locks in, it'll pull it into place. So hitch, step, pivot, make sure you get that full rotation. So it's good to have a nice belt where you can actually see what's happening with your hips as you go out, and then you can make sure you can see that hip flying into position. Like so. Okay, so what the hands do is a little bit more complicated than taisabaki, because now they're actually going to be up in guard. Our standard guard is to have the lead hand higher and the rear hand lower and closer to the body. So the idea here is that we have about a fist worth of distance between the hand and the solar plexus, so that you're basically protecting your core, your solar plexus, and then another fist's distance out in front and above, protecting your face and your upper portion. Now you want to have it so that you can still see over your fingers. You don't want your hand blocking your vision. So just about nose height would be pretty good, something like so. So when we hitch step pivot, we change which foot is in the lead, so we change which hand is in the lead. And the way to do that is, if I can stop in halfway position, we could be in this position, and then as we pivot around, come to there, come to here, come to there, come to here, come to there. Another way to do it is this idea of putting one hand behind your ear, and it's actually good for protecting the outside of your head as you're turning around, so it's a recommendation. And that is, as you come in, this hand comes up like that, instead of just being crossed in front of your body, that you're actually up here, and as you withdraw the one hand, the other comes out in front. And I actually like that, and that's how I practice. So you have to do that to get the foot-hand coordination correct. You have to do it nice and slowly. So hands up, and then in, and pivot. 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 So what it requires is you just reach a little bit further. It's like you're making the X in front of your body, but you just reach a little bit further so that that head stays protected as long as possible. So as I'm coming in, it's protected. I'm turning, it's protected, until this one takes over. Now it's protected. So whatever's to that side of me is unable to have access to my head. So together, all these pieces go like this. So I've got, let's start with left foot forward. So hands up, hitch step in, pivot, and cross the hands. Hitch step in, pivot, cross the hands. So let me do it the other way around. Left side, left foot forward from this side. This way you can see the hands easier. Hitch step in, pivot. Hitch step in, and pivot. Hitch step in, pivot. Hitch step in, pivot. Now you'll notice also that we have a similar problem with this than we did have with the momentum of taisabaki throwing us onto our back foot. So on this one, what the tendency is that that back foot also takes weight. And we have a tendency to come more momentum with our upper body than our lower body, and we end up on that foot. And one of the most common things that people do to counteract that is they lock that back foot. So you come in, you hitch step, and you pivot, and the next thing you know is that you have that foot locked, and you're kind of pushing forward a little bit. It's okay to be pushing forward if you're about to do another one, because that's appropriate, you're about to move forward. But the trick again is to keep the knees bent so that you don't lock that out. The other thing that happens when you lock that out is you hitch step in, you lock it, and you tend to pop up. And you don't want to pop up at the end, for a number of reasons, and one of which is that the taller you are, the more off balance is potential there, because your lever just got longer. And also you've got less ability to move, to spin and on the spot, to turn, and to move your hip. And finally, you have a tendency, if you do lock that foot, to put more weight onto it, lock that leg, to put more weight onto it, and now suddenly you're off balance because you're standing on one foot. So what you do is, as you come in, you dig into the mat with those ball of feet as you turn. Dig into the mat with those ball of feet as you turn, so that you're turning with your knees bent. And of course practice, right? So you need to be able to realize at what point you need to stop and let your body kind of float into position without going back. So that's what we practice over and over. So that's it for a basic introduction to all the different things that we do in class. If you've had a chance to review this, it'll give you a better opportunity to understand what it is we do. It's a good idea to come back to this and review it as a reference material to accurately get the things that you've been trying to do, and it'll give you a good pointers towards honing in those skills and making your movements and positions and your workout match with what it is we're trying to do in class. So hope to see you practicing this in person, if not live, certainly online.